Hello. Welcome to my channel, Toadstool ASMR. This is my first ever ASMR video on this channel. I had an old channel that I posted a couple of videos on, but I deleted those. I'm wanting this channel to be mostly ASMR about books because that's my favorite ASMR content to consume. I love ultramarine ASMR, Christina Esoterica, Cozy Hobbit ASMR, Sunny Days ASMR, and all of their book content. So if you like book ASMR and you haven't heard of those channels, maybe check them out. I'll link them below. So this video is going to be a huge book haul. I am going to be showing you over 20 books, I believe. I haven't counted, but I think there's over 20 from four different sources. So I think I'm going to divide this up into two videos because my internet has very slow upload speeds. So I think I'm going to have to divide this up over two videos. So the first part of this book haul is going to be books I got from my neighbor and books I got from Barnes & Noble. So I'm going to get started with the books that my neighbor gave me. So the first book that my neighbor gave me is The Witch Cult in Western Europe. The Witch Cult in Western Europe. And this is by Margaret A. Murray. And this is written by an anthropologist. And I don't know how my neighbor and I got on the subject of witches, but we did. And he said that if I haven't read this, I should. And he said that he wasn't going to read it again so that I could just have it. So that's pretty cool. Now, most of the books in this haul I have not read yet. But once I do read them, I might do a check-in or something where I talk about them. And so I don't know how much I want to talk about each book. I think I'm just gonna dedicate a few seconds to each book, not too much time, because I'll be honest, sometimes when I watch book hauls and someone's talking about a book for 10 minutes, it can be a little bit much, and I'm a very spoiler-free person, but I mean nonfiction, no spoilers, but still. Okay. The next book my neighbor gave me is The Uses of Enchantment, The Meaning and Importance of Fairy Tales. And he had multiple copies of this book, so he gave me a copy. So I'll just read you a little bit of the blurb on the back. Bruno Bettelheim was one of the great child psychologists of the 20th century, and perhaps none of his books has been more influential than this revelatory study of fairy tales and their universal importance in understanding childhood development. Analyzing a wide range of traditional stories, from the tales of Sinbad to the Three Little Pigs, Hansel and Gretel, and the Sleeping Beauty, Bettelheim shows how the fantastical, sometimes cruel, but always deeply significant narrative strands of the classic fairy tales can aid in the greatest human task, that of finding meaning for one's life. That's the cover. Little Red Riding Hood. I showed my face. And then the last book that my neighbor gave me is The Journey to the East by Herman Hesse. I don't know. I never know if it's pronounced Hesse or Hesse. I'm one of those people that often mispronounces words because a lot of times I learn a new word by reading it, not from hearing it. And so a lot of times I'm not sure the proper way to pronounce a word. So let me know if you know. Is it Hesse or Hesse? I think it's Hesse. So, in simple, mesmerizing prose, Herman Hesse tells of a journey both geographic and spiritual. H.H., a German choirmaster, is invited on an expedition with the League, a secret society whose members include Paul Klee, Mozart, and Albertus Magnus. spiritual renew. And then I'm just gonna stop there and not read the whole blurb or the whole summary, but I wanted to read this book for a long time, and he gave it to me to read. And I will say that I started to read and immediately realized it was referencing other works, his past works like Siddhartha, and I decided that it was best if I read all of his books in order. So that's what I've decided to do. So therefore I stopped reading this and I'm starting to read all of his books in order. Those are the 3 books that my neighbor gave me, which called in Western Europe the uses of enchantment. And so continuing on to the Barnes and Noble part of my book haul. Now keep in mind that I'm filming this in January, and I got most of these books at the end of last year. So these Barnes and Noble books I got Black Friday, during like their Black Friday sale. Okay, so the first book was recommended by the same neighbor that gave me those 3 books, and it's Iron John, a book about men by Robert Bly. And my cursory understanding of this book is like Women Who Run with the Wolves is to women as Iron John is to men. So I think that this should be an interesting read. I'm gonna read you a little bit of a blurb. Bly's vision is based on his pioneering work with men as well as on reflections on his own life. He addresses the devastating effects of remote fathers and mourns the disappearance of male initiation rites in our culture. Finding rich meaning in ancient stories and legends, Bly uses the grim fairy tale Iron John, in which a mentor or wild man guides the young male through the 8 stages of growth, to remind the reader of long-forgotten images of deep and vigorous masculinity, with particular care for the young man's soul. So that is Iron John, and I really enjoy this cover. I believe this is a new cover that's for like I think it's the 25th anniversary. This is a new cover. So you'll see in this book haul, I have a lot of books that were recommended to me from people, or I don't know, a lot of these books were recommended to me from people either that I know in real life or they are books I found through watching YouTube videos. So I just took like a little coffee break and then I returned to my haul and talked for like 10 minutes and the camera was off. So I think the last book that I showed was Iron John, which was recommended by my neighbor. This next book, Belonging, Remembering Ourselves Home, I think I found on Instagram, through Instagram, and the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I love it. I'm gonna read the back. Feel like you don't belong. You are not alone. The world has never been more connected, yet people are lonelier than ever. Whether we feel unworthy, alienated, or anxious about our place in the world, the absence of belonging is the great silent wound of our times. Most people think of belonging as a mythical place, and they may spend a lifetime searching for it in vain. But what if belonging isn't a place at all? What if it is a skill that has been lost or forgotten? With her signature depth and eloquence, Tokopa maps a path to belonging from the inside out. Drawing on myth, stories, and dreams, she takes us into the origins of our estrangement, reframing exile as a necessary initiation into authenticity. Then she shares the competencies of belonging, a set of ancestral practices to heal our wounds and restore true belonging to our lives and to the world. So I'm very excited to read this book. A little bit about me. I live in a cabin in the woods in a very rural area. I'm not even sure the population of the town I live in, but I would say it's definitely under 200 people. And severe social anxiety, and I was living in a situation where I had 3 roommates, and we were sharing 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, so it was 4 people sharing 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and so it was a bit crowded, and I started getting having really bad stomach issues, and really bad social anxiety, and so I decided to move into the middle of nowhere, and I really thought I would live here for like a year, 2 years tops, but it's been, I think, like 6 years maybe. I'm not exactly sure, but it's been a long time, a lot longer than I thought I would live here, and I've learned a lot of lessons living alone in the woods, and maybe one day I'll make a video about that if anyone is interested, but it's definitely been a unique experience. When you live in a very rural area, you really come to rely on your neighbors, and, you know, growing up, I grew up in Florida in a very, like, kind of suburban area, you know, more of like a suburban kind of city environment, where, like, I knew my neighbors, and, you know, you kind of cover for your neighbors in a sense, like, and your neighbors would kind of, you know, you'd have each other's back to a degree, but there wasn't, like, a true reliance on your neighbors like there is here. It's very interesting. I don't know, it's very interesting, and I'd love to make a whole video on that, but I'm getting on a tangent. So the next books I got from Barnes & Noble are from Llewellyn's, which is like a new agey, like, witchcraft publisher, but I got the 2022 Herbal Almanac. So years ago, I got, I think, like, the 2019 Herbal Almanac, and what I like about this is it has, like, a planting guide in the back. So it has some, like, themed garden plans. So if you don't want to go through the trouble of kind of planting your own garden, but you want to garden, you kind of maybe feel overwhelmed, there's these, like, pre-planned gardens that you can do, which I think is pretty cool. And there's also, what's really cool is there's a huge, like, planting section in the back that has ways for you to actually, like, plan your garden, as well as write down kind of the tasks you're gonna have to do every month, the plants that you're gonna plant and harvest, and that I think is really, really cool. I really want to have a garden this summer. In the past, I've done kind of like a porch garden where I had planter boxes on my porch that I grew vegetables in, but this year I'm wanting to go even further, and I want to have some container gardens, but I also want to have some raised planter beds. I would love to make some, like, garden ASMR content, so if y'all would be interested in that, let me know. But this book also has a bunch of articles at the beginning. So there's articles about, you know, different plants. There's articles on growing and gathering, cooking, health and beauty, DIY and crafts, plant profiles, and then gardening resources. So I, including a companion planting guide. So I think that, you know, this book, it's a little, like, woo-woo in spots, you know, but overall, I think it's a pretty cool resource if you want to start a garden, because it kind of gives you somewhere to start. So also from Barnes & Noble and Llewellyn's, I got the 2022 Moon Sign book, and this is kind of similar to the Farmer's Almanac in that there's a section that's, like, predicts the weather for the year, a section that tells you basically, you know, what phase the moon is going to be in different, you know, different days, kind of like a moon calendar. And it also has favorable and, space for you to write. And I just think that that's kind of, I don't know, just kind of fun and kind of interesting. So please, you know, I don't know. I'm someone where how do I put this? I don't think that you have to believe in something to find enjoyment in it. And I know that that's maybe a controversial opinion, or maybe it sounds like a shitty thing to say, but, you know, I know a lot of people who do not believe in astrology, but they find entertainment and enjoyment from it. And on one hand, it's like, what's it hurting? On the other hand, there's the whole, like, Carl Sagan's argument that that's kind of, you know, the more that people get into unscientific pursuits, then the harder it is for the masses to believe science. I can make a whole video on this. I don't need to go into this tangent right now about science versus like astrology and stuff like that, but yeah, I get really off task really easily, so this is gonna be a long video and I still have lots of books to show. So the next 4 books I got from Barnes & Noble, I found out about all of these books through an ASMR artist named Christina Esoterica. I believe that it's Christina Esoterica and not Christina Esoteric. I'm pretty sure it's Christina Esoterica. And she has a video called like ASMR bookshelf tour. I will link it below. When I tell you this is one of my favorite ASMR videos of all times, it is. I think I've watched it all the way through 3 times and it's over an hour long. So I absolutely, you know, I love books. Reading is really important to me. I have a ton of books and I love watching ASMR videos about books, and I've been specifically getting really into bookshelf tours, so if that's something that you would be interested in, I currently have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bookshelves in my room. Now, some of these bookshelves are like full-size bookshelves, and then some of these are very small. Like, I'm counting underneath my nightstand, I have like just 1 shelf of books, and I'm counting that as a bookshelf. But I have a lot of books, and so I would love to one day do some sort of bookshelf tour. But in her tour, she goes through different books, recommends them, and I took note of a lot of books. Someone is calling me. So I took note of a lot of the books that she recommended and made kind of a list, and as I feel so inclined, I'm gonna kind of purchase and read a lot of those books, or even check them out from the library. The first book she recommended was already on my list of books that I wanted to read, and it is Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Now, I remember in, I think, 9th grade in English class, kind of discussing Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, all of that, and maybe even reading excerpts from this book, but I've never read the whole book, and my understanding is that this books at once, and that is just because I have severe ADHD, inattentive type, and I love like reading multiple books at once and kind of seeing how these different thoughts and books interact, especially when they have when they're very different subject matter. And I almost feel like reading nonfiction as an adult as a form of schooling oneself. And so I like to read a book that's like, you know, scientific while I'm reading a book that's more on psychology, maybe a book that's self-development or self-help, alongside a book on mythology, alongside a book that's like a biography. And sometimes when you're reading all these books from all these sources at once, you're able to synthesize all the ideas and come up with new ideas. And I don't know, it's just, I might also make a whole video if anyone's interested in why I read multiple books at once, and kind of the benefits and the drawbacks of that, and some techniques that can kind of help you keep track of, you know, the different books you're reading. Let me know. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I had a voicemail about a job interview, so I had to go and kind of take care of that, but I'm back. I think I was talking about books that I was recommended via Christina Esoterica's bookshelf tour. And so the next book is The Chalice and the Blade, Our History, Our Future by Rianne Eisler. And so it says, the legacy of the sacred feminine. The Chalice and the Blade tells a new story of our cultural origins. It shows that warfare and the war of the sexes are neither divinely nor biologically ordained. It provides verification that a better future is possible, and is in fact firmly rooted in the haunting dramas of what happened in our past. And I believe this book kind of deals with the concept of like a dominator society versus a partnership society. My camera just fell. I believe that that's kind of the thesis of this book, but I haven't read it, so I can't really, you know, delve that deep into it. But I am really excited to read this book. Once again, it kind of deals with things that I'm interested in. And it is 30 years old. Classic. So the next book recommended by Christina Esoterica is The Quantum Universe by Brian Cox and Jeff Forshaw. So quantum physics is another subject that's very much of interest to me. My knowledge of physics isn't very vast, but I'm highly curious about it, and I think when it comes to a lot of topics, curiosity is the most important variable. Like, if you're curious about something, even if you have no knowledge of it, or even if it's above your understanding, you're able to gain a lot more from it than someone who's brilliant but could care less, if that makes sense. That's just kind of my personal perspective on learning and knowledge, is that having curiosity and the ability to want to learn and to ask questions is the most important thing. It's more important than any amount of intellectual ability. So that's just my 2 cents. But back to I just get on so many tangents. Back to the book. And so the quantum universe cuts through the confusion surrounding quantum mechanics. It asks what observations of the natural world made the theory necessary, how it was constructed, and why we are confident that, for all its apparent strangeness, it accurately describes the way our world works. So I love like science books like this that are kind of, I think the term that I've heard used is like science for the general audience, something along those lines, or science for like a popular audience. I think that's, I don't know, I'm I love learning, and I'm someone where if I could be in school for my whole life, but there be no homework, it just be like learning based, I would 100% do that. I think the great thing about a society the way that it's structured now in the internet is that one of the only positives really in many ways about the internet is access to educational information that you might otherwise not be privy to. For example, like you can live in the middle of nowhere, like me, and you can watch university lectures on YouTube. You can, read books, listen to audiobooks from your local library. There's so many free resources out there for education, and of course there's just as many for misinformation, but I just think that it's a wonderful thing that you can essentially be a lifetime learner and not have to pay a tuition, not have to have homework, and to be able to study only what you want. If you haven't realized by now, I'm definitely a Ravenclaw when it comes to Harry Potter houses because I love learning. I think that learning is great and I'm very much a nerd in that way. But I also am so guilty of getting distracted easily and wanting to sit down and read a really educational book and then going on my phone and scrolling through like Reddit or, watching fun, YouTube videos. Yeah, so I'm not saying that I'm this like scholar by any means. I'm just saying that I genuinely enjoy learning, and that's why I buy so many like nonfiction books, and that's why I like reading books from different perspectives and different kind of ideas. So the last book I got recommended from Christina Esoterica is Kissing the Limitless: Deep Magic and the Great Work of Transforming Yourself and the World. And so I'm going to read what the back says. It says, with thorn coil as your guide, learn to practice the great work of the ancient alchemists and magicians. Become self-possessed, in constant communication with your divine self, and connect with the limitless divine. Access key components of effective magic: breath, will, and desire. No matter what pagan tradition you practice, you can use Thorn's tools of energy and breathwork, shadow and dream work, tarot and meditation to quite literally reshape the world. And so I don't want to get down a super rabbit hole about like my beliefs and so on and so forth, but I believe that you can read a book without necessarily agreeing with everything the author says and still benefit from that book and benefit from applying things you learn in that book to your life. That's kind of my general perspective on things. So I have not read this book yet, but based just on that back, I'm very interested. I think that this is going to be a really interesting read. And what I like about this, just flipping through it, is it kind of has a little blurb and then it says like doing the work, and it has kind of like an activity or something that you can actually, a way that you can put into practice kind of what it's teaching you. And I think that that is pretty cool. So I'm excited to read this and to report back on my feelings on it. So that is the end of the books I got from my neighbor and from Barnes & Noble. I'm going to make a part two, where I'm going to cover books that I got from my local bookstore as well as books that I got from Book Outlet. So I look forward to that. So see ya.